Hello. Okay, we have Chapter 3, The Innocent Perception, Section 5, Beyond Perception. I have said that the abilities you possess are only shadows of your real strength, and that perception, which is inherently judgmental, was introduced only after the separation. No one has been sure of anything since. That's pretty interesting. Since the separation, no one has been sure of anything. I have also made it clear that the resurrection was the means for the return to knowledge, which was accomplished by the union of my will with the Father's. We can now establish a distinction that will clarify some of our subsequent statements. Since the separation, the words create and make have become confused. And I find this one of the most helpful distinctions ever. Well, we still need to distinguish between this and that. The use of the words make and create. I found that to be very helpful. When you make something, you do so out of a specific sense of lack or need. Anything made for a specific purpose has no true generalizability. When you make something to fill a perceived lack, you are tacitly implying that you believe in separation. The ego has invented many ingenious thought systems for this purpose. None of them is creative. Inventiveness is wasted effort, even in its most ingenious form. The highly specific nature of invention is not worthy of the abstract creativity of God's creations. Knowing, as we have already observed, does not lead to doing. The confusion between your real creation and what you have made of yourself is so profound that it has become literally impossible for you to know anything. Knowledge is always stable, and it is quite evident that you are not. Nevertheless, you are perfectly stable as God created you. So we get to know ourselves as God created us, not as we have made ourselves. So in the egoic identification, that's inherently unstable and will never be stable. But as we truly are, there's our stability. Okay, in this sense, when your behavior is unstable, you are disagreeing with God's idea of your creation. Or another way of saying that, you don't even have to analyze your behavior. When I feel disquiet, it's an indicator I am disagreeing with God's idea of my creation. You can do this if you choose, but you would hardly want to do it if you were in your right mind. And that's the objective of every day, to be led into right mind by allowing our misperceptions to be cleared up for us. The fundamental question you continually ask yourself cannot properly be directed to yourself at all. You keep asking what it is you are. So if I'm directing this question, what am I, to myself? I am good, I am kind, I am flawed, I am this, I am that. I'm asking ego. An ego is kind of like this invention I made. I could think of it like a computer program. I made it to send me thoughts that would be completely different than thoughts Spirit would send me. And the thoughts keep me in misperception. So I have to take responsibility for that. I'm not a victim of it. I made it. And what it gives me is this identity that isn't real. It's fundamentally unstable. And it tells me everything about what I am not. It tells me everything about what you are not. And so I learn that it's insane. I learn to stop listening to it. And I learn to listen instead to thoughts from Spirit. Okay. This implies that the answer is not only one you know, but is also one that is up to you to supply. Yet you cannot perceive yourself correctly. You have no image to be perceived. Let's think about that. You have no image to be perceived. You have no image to be perceived. The word image is always perception related and not a part of knowledge. Images are symbolic and stand for something else. The idea of changing your image recognizes the power of perception, but also implies that there is nothing stable to know. Knowing is not open to interpretation. You may try to interpret meaning, but this is always open to error because it refers to the perception of meaning. Such incongruities are the result of attempts to regard yourself as separated and unseparated at the same time. It is impossible to make so fundamental a confusion without increasing your overall confusion still further. Your mind may have become very ingenious, but as always happens when method and content are separated, it is utilized in a futile attempt to escape from an inescapable impasse. Ingenuity is totally divorced from knowledge because knowledge does not require ingenuity. And where this comes into my experience is lack of inspiration to, invent, do, accomplish, achieve goals. That all falls away. Figure things out. There's much more of just a very simple looking to spirit and saying, show me, guide me. And it's really never about building a castle for myself here. It's only about allowing myself to wake up. Ingenious thinking is not the truth that shall set you free, but you are free of the need to engage in it when you are willing to let it go. That's a great burden. That's a great burden to let go of, the need to figure things out or to invent. Yeah, that's letting a big burden go. Prayer is a way of asking for something. It is the medium of miracles. It's like a new language we learn because we've learned the old one, overlearned the old one so well. So the whole day becomes about prayer. And this is from someone who did not understand prayer before. I didn't understand what the purpose of that was. I didn't understand, I think as a young child, why wouldn't you just be happy all the time? Why would you have to stop and interrupt your happiness to focus in some grim way? Prayer, when I was a kid, looked to me like a grim focus. That's how it seemed to come to me from outside when I saw it. Like, what is this? To me, play and fun and joy was the prayer. I wouldn't even think of it as a prayer because I had a negative association with the word. But now I feel like when my focus is on happiness, on true happiness, I live, and when my focus isn't on distraction, it's on distraction part of the time. But more and more it expands into when my focus is on true happiness, the day is lived in prayer. It's lived in that state of openness to spirit and willingness, and being with spirit, willingness to be guided. So, yeah, prayer is, the idea of it has really changed for me. Okay, I'm going to start that paragraph over. Prayer is a way of asking for something. It is the medium of miracles. But the only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness, because those who have been forgiven have everything. Once forgiveness has been accepted, prayer in the usual sense becomes utterly meaningless. The prayer for forgiveness is nothing more than a request that you may be able to recognize what you already have. In electing perception instead of knowledge, you placed yourself in a position where you could resemble your Father only by perceiving miraculously. You placed yourself in a position where you could resemble your Father only by perceiving miraculously. So that's our invitation now. You have lost the knowledge that you yourself are a miracle of God. There's another thing to look at. You have lost the knowledge that you yourself are a miracle of God. Creation is your source and your only real function. The statement, God created man in his own image and likeness, needs reinterpretation. Image can be understood as thought, and likeness as of a like quality. God did create spirit in his own thought and of a quality like to his own. There is nothing else. Perception, on the other hand, is impossible without a belief in more and less. At every level, it involves selectivity. Perception is a continual process of accepting and rejecting, organizing and reorganizing, shifting and changing. Evaluation is an essential part of perception because judgments are necessary in order to select. What happens to perceptions if there are no judgments and nothing but perfect quality? Perception becomes impossible. Truth can only be known. All of it is equally true, and knowing any part of it is to know all of it. Only perception involves partial awareness. Knowledge transcends the laws governing perception because partial knowledge is impossible. It is all one and has no separate parts. You who are really one with it need but know yourself, and your knowledge is complete. To know God's miracle is to know Him. I'm going to say that a couple more times. To know God's miracle is to know Him. To know God's miracle is to know Him. These are just parts of the Course that really stand out to me as present points of learning, going deeper. So that's why I just sit in them for a moment and let it sink in. Okay, forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. As we go through the Course, there are many, many definitions of a lot of the words that are used, and I just love seeing it from a different angle. So forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. Correct perception of your brother is necessary because minds have chosen to see themselves as separate. And when I look out at the world, I go over to my dad's house and help him, and he has the news on a lot. So on the news I've been seeing footage of Ukraine and talk about the Ukraine and Russia and many other things. But what an opportunity that is. Correct perception of your brother is necessary. We need to see all of our brothers, all of our fellow beings, without exception, as we have to perceive them correctly. We have to see them as they are, prior to any bit of the illusion touching them, right? As pure beings of light. And to remember that as world leaders are discussed, to remember that as politicians are discussed, to remember that as some are presented as aggressors and some are presented as victims, to remember that, that's very powerful, and it's a constant invitation. Okay. Spirit knows God completely. That is its miraculous power. The fact that each one has this power completely is a condition entirely alien to the world's thinking. I'm going to read those few sentences a few times because I really need to sit there and sink in. Spirit knows God completely. That is its miraculous power. The fact that each one has this power completely is a condition entirely alien to the world's thinking. Spirit knows God completely. That is its miraculous power. The fact that each one has this power completely is a condition entirely alien to the world's thinking. And as we think of ourselves as Course students, one of our invitations is to see the power that belongs to us all equally, remembering that it's alive in every being we meet, every being we think of. We empower everyone as we empower ourselves equally. Every being we seem to see on TV, in a YouTube, anywhere, ever, any being we seem to remember in memory, everybody has this power equally, right now. That really turns things around, and it's a benign power. It can do no harm. Okay, the world believes that if anyone has everything, there's nothing left. Oh, yeah, that's kind of what I just said. But God's miracles are as total as his thoughts, because they are his thoughts. As long as perception lasts, prayer has a place. And to me, prayer just means going into what is real, going into what is true. Since perception rests on lack, those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement and given themselves over to truth. Well, guess what? Who's in the same boat with us? Everyone we seem to see here. So when we try to sort ourselves out into categories, let's remember that everyone seeming to walk around in a body is perceiving, and we're all in the same boat. Okay, perception is based on a separated state, so that anyone who perceives it all needs healing. Communion, not prayer, is the natural state of those who know. God and his miracles are inseparable. How beautiful indeed are the thoughts of God who live in his light. If you think of everyone, every being, everyone you think of, as a thought of God, and that only, nothing else standing in the way, just that. Your worth is beyond perception because it is beyond doubt. Do not perceive yourself in different lights. Know yourself in the one light where the miracle that is you is perfectly clear. That's worth looking at again. Know yourself in the one light where the miracle that is you is perfectly clear. Know yourself in the one light where the miracle that is you is perfectly clear. Well, there's my invitation today. Thank you.